Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. The president has appointed two lieutenant governors for Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. See, when the special status of Jammu and Kashmir was withdrawn under Article 370, the state was also bifurcated into two new union territories, that is the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and the Union Territory of Ladakh. These two new union territories will formally come into existence on the 31st of October. So in a few days, the two new union territories will need an administrator who will function as an agent of the center. And hence, the President of India has appointed a lieutenant governor for both the union territories. When I say that the appointment has been made in the name of the President, it doesn't mean that the President has discretionary powers. The appointment of the Lieutenant Governor has been made in the name of the President because the President is the head of the executive. The appointment has been made based on the recommendation of the Centre. And when we say Centre, it refers to the Ministry of Home Affairs, which is the nodal ministry that is responsible for the administration of all union territories. But the office of the Lieutenant Governor has always been controversial, just like the office of the governor in a state. See, in a state, a governor is appointed by the center in the name of the president, and he functions as the nominal head, and he is considered to be an agent of the center. The office of the governor is vested with a certain set of constitutional powers, and the governor also exercises a certain set of administrative and discretionary powers. But the manner in which governors have functioned and the manner in which the center has misused the office of the governor has always been a source of controversy in a state. Similarly, in the case of union territories, we have lieutenant governors, administrators or chief commissioners who are appointed by the center in the name of the president. They act as the nominal head and they enjoy a certain set of constitutional and administrative powers. As of now, there are only 3 union territories which have a lieutenant governor. This includes Delhi, Puducherry and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. To this list, 2 more union territories will be added from the 31st of October, and this includes the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and the UT of Ladakh. And the rest of the union territories have the office of the administrator or the chief commissioner. Amongst these 3 union territories, which already have the office of the lieutenant governor, the case of Delhi and Puducherry is quite unique. Because amongst all the union territories, as of now, it's only Delhi and Puducherry which have an elected assembly and an elected government of their own. Very soon, even the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir will get its own assembly and elected government. So this places the elected assembly and the governments of these 3 union territories in direct conflict with the office of the lieutenant governor over the question of division of powers. See, in the case of Puducherry, its elected assembly and government enjoys a certain set of powers as defined under Article 239A of the Indian Constitution. And similarly, the elected assembly and the elected government of Delhi enjoys a certain set of powers as defined under Article 239AA of the Indian Constitution. But at times, these powers, which are guaranteed by the Constitution, have been encroached upon by the office of the Lieutenant Governor. When you compare Delhi and Puducherry, the case of Delhi is quite unique because it is the national capital territory. By virtue of being the national capital, it is the seat of power for the central government. So as a result, the center has reserved 3 subjects that are there on the state list for itself. These 3 subjects include police, land and public order. In these 3 subjects, the elected assembly and government of Delhi has no powers, and these powers are exercised by the center through the office of the lieutenant governor. But many a times, the lieutenant governor has exceeded his mandate and he has interfered with the functioning of the elected government of Delhi in other subjects as well. Then if you look at Puducherry, it actually enjoys more powers as compared to Delhi. The elected assembly and the elected government of Puducherry has complete powers to make laws on all the subjects that are there in the state list and the concurrent list. Because unlike Delhi, a few subjects have not been reserved by the center in the case of Puducherry. But despite this, it has been alleged that the Lieutenant Governor frequently interferes with the functioning of the elected government of Puducherry. This conflict over division of powers and jurisdiction has reached the doorsteps of the judiciary, and multiple cases have been fought at the Supreme Court and as well as at the respective high courts. The judiciary has also ruled that the Lieutenant Governor should not unnecessarily interfere with the functioning and the jurisdiction of elected governments. The courts have ruled that even the Lieutenant Governor should be bound by the advice of the Council of Ministers, just like a governor is bound by the advice of the Council of Ministers in a state. But of course, the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi is an exception, because the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi has exclusive jurisdiction over these three subjects. Because Delhi being the national capital, these three subjects have been reserved for the center. But apart from this, the center and the lieutenant governors, they need to ensure that they do not unnecessarily interfere with the jurisdiction of elected governments. With regard to these two new union territories, this conflict does not arise for Ladakh, because Ladakh will not have an elected assembly and it will be directly administered by the center through the office of the Lieutenant Governor, similar to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. But this may not be the case with regard to Jammu and Kashmir, because the Union Territory of J&K will have an elected assembly. So once the assembly has been constituted, we need to wait and watch as to how things will play out between the elected government and the office of the Lieutenant Governor. Next, we have an article on page number 1 which refers to the newly notified rules under the RTI Act. See, in July 2019, the government pushed the RTI Amendment Bill through the Parliament. These proposed amendments created a huge controversy because they were designed to dilute the powers of the information commissions and the information commissioners. Through these amendments, the government was looking to dilute the independence and the autonomy of the information commissioners by gaining a leverage over their tenure and conditions of service. So naturally, when the bill was introduced in the Parliament, it was opposed by the opposition parties and RTI activists. But despite this opposition, the government managed to push the bill through the Parliament by using its majority, and it did not give any opportunity for debates and discussions. See, when a new bill is passed by the Parliament, it receives the assent of the President and becomes an act. The provisions of the new act will come into effect only when the new rules are notified by the government under the new legislation. Yesterday, the government has notified these new rules, according to which the tenure of information commissioners has been reduced from 5 years to 3 years. And the government has given discretionary powers to itself while determining the conditions of service of the information commissioners. So this will enable the government to determine the salary and other service conditions of the information commissioners. And moreover, the government has given to itself the powers to relax the tenure of the information commissioners on a case-by-case basis. So these controversial provisions will give more control to the government over the functioning of the information commissions and the information commissioners. And this is bound to weaken the independence and the autonomy of these institutions. The RTI activists have also criticized the government for the manner in which the government has notified the new rules. Because generally, the established procedure is that the government will come out with draft rules which are first placed in the public domain in order to promote consultation and generate opinions and feedback from the public. In this case, none of these procedures were followed, and the government has notified the new rules in a discreet manner. This has led the RTI activists to question the true intentions of the government, because according to them, these new rules will dilute the independence and the autonomy of these institutions. it will defeat the very purpose of the RTI Act, which was to promote transparency and accountability in governance and administration. So that's the reason why the RTI activists are saying that these new rules will basically turn the information commissions into caged parrots. Now let's take up an article from page number 11, which refers to the IndiGen initiative of CSIR. Under this initiative, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research is offering free genome mapping for Indian citizens. So first let us understand what is genome mapping. See, genome mapping is nothing but the mapping out of your genetic sequence, which in turn will help the doctors to figure out your proclivity to certain types of diseases. This genetic map will help the doctors to identify certain markers which are associated with few types of diseases. Because see, there are a few types of genes which are associated with a certain type of diseases. So if these gene markers are present in your genetic makeup, then it means that you have a proclivity to develop these diseases in the future. So based on this assessment, your doctor can provide you the right advice so that adequate precaution and medical care can be taken in order to prevent the occurrence of this disease in the future, or at least to reduce the risk associated with the disease. The IndiGen initiative has been taken up by CSIR for two reasons. One is to test whether genome mapping can be carried out on a large scale and whether a large number of people can be advised based on their health risks and their proclivity to diseases. The second reason is to promote research in order to understand the connection between genes and diseases. This project will help CSIR to understand how the variations in our genes are connected to certain types of diseases. Under this project, CSIR is trying to obtain samples from people across India in order to ensure that the genetic diversity is as wide as possible. And once the genome map is created, it is made available to the individual through an app. This will enable the individual to consult a doctor and obtain actionable medical advice based on his proclivity to diseases. Now let's take up a column from the editorial page. The column written by Happymon Jacob evaluates the transformations that are taking place in India's foreign policy under the Modi government. The writer says that under the Modi government, India's foreign policy has acquired a fresh dynamism which was not evident under some of the previous governments. He says that under Prime Minister Modi, Indian diplomacy has become hyperactive, and this is evident from the increased interactions that India is having with foreign leaders, foreign governments, and as well as with the Indian diaspora. The writer credits the Modi government for some of these major transformations that are taking place in Indian diplomacy, and he says that the Modi government is one of the few governments which has been able to match its rhetoric with reality. According to him, the Modi government has made a lot of tall claims and it has taken a hard stance on sensitive issues, but it is one of the few governments which has been able to match this rhetoric with action. In order to deliver on its rhetoric, the Modi government has not hesitated to employ hard power. This was evident during the Doklam crisis with China. It was evident during the surgical strikes which was carried out against Pakistan after the Uri attacks. It was also evident during the Balkot airstrikes which were carried out after the Pulwama terror attacks. And more recently, the same approach can be seen with regard to the policy decisions related to the special status of Jammu and Kashmir. The writer says that the last time that Indian diplomacy was driven by such extensive usage of hard power was probably during the time of the Indira Gandhi government. But the writer questions whether this dynamism and hyperactivism which is being seen in the foreign policy of the Modi government has any long-term vision. He questions whether the Modi government's foreign policy can shape global geopolitics with forward-looking and system-shaping narratives. He questions whether these transformations represent a fundamental shift in India's foreign policy. According to the writer, this hyperactivism and rhetoric in the foreign policy of the Modi government is entirely driven by domestic factors and the need to impress the domestic audience. That's the reason why the diplomacy of the Modi government has been excessively focused on Pakistan, terrorism, and Jammu and Kashmir, because these are some of the issues which appeals to the domestic audience. The writer says that India's diplomatic capital has been excessively spent only on these issues, and this has come at the cost of other critical foreign policy priorities such as the ongoing peace process in Afghanistan, the balance of ties with major powers such as the United States, China, Russia, etc., the principle of strategic autonomy, which is the fundamental doctrine of India's foreign policy, the soft power image of India, which used to employ hard power only when absolutely necessary, and it has also taken a hit on the nuanced approach to foreign policy making that was developed by other governments. The writer says that India has not been able to play a meaningful role in Afghanistan, and it has not been able to engage with the Taliban because of the hard stance and the rhetoric-driven approach that India has taken towards terrorism and extremism. This rhetoric-driven approach of the Modi government is based on the need to please the domestic audience and to politicize foreign policy issues for the sake of domestic audience. The writer says that such an approach lacks a long-term vision and it pushes India to look at all external issues from the domestic angle. This restricts the ability of the Indian government to take realistic and practical decisions on few external developments because the government is preoccupied with pleasing the domestic audience by politicizing foreign policy issues. So the writer is asking the Modi government to develop a long-term vision for India's foreign policy and ensure that it has an impact on global geopolitics instead of building up rhetoric on few select issues and using hard power in order to achieve them. Now let's take up a column written by Mr. Tabish, which evaluates the need for universal human rights, which is not defined on the basis of religion or nationality or cultural differences. The writer begins by providing a beautiful explanation about how abstract ideologies and abstract thoughts can destroy the physical being or the human being. We have come across families which kill their own children, especially daughter, in the name of honor killing. We have come across violence, lynchings, and terrorism in the name of religion. We have come across oppression and persecution in the name of racial superiority, in the name of nationalism and cultural differences. All of these are abstract thoughts and abstract ideologies which have ended up destroying the physical human being. And we have come to accept the physical destruction of the human being in the name of abstract thoughts and ideologies because we have not defined universal human rights. Our society in general has come to accept that human rights is subjective. We have come to accept that human rights are different for a man and a woman. We have come to accept that human rights are different for a Hindu, for a Christian, and for a Muslim. We have come to accept that human rights are different for an Afghan and for an American. This subjective definition of human rights, which is based on abstract thoughts and ideologies such as family honor, religious teachings, nationalism, cultural differences, etc., it has ended up destroying humanity. I am sure that we have all come across cases in our own households where the rights accorded to a man and women are different. Similarly, in our society, we have come across cases where the rights accorded to human beings are different based on their religion, their nationality, their caste, their race, etc. So in this context, the writer is asking us to abandon this subjective definition of human rights, which is based on abstract thoughts and ideologies. Instead, he is calling upon the society to provide a universal definition of human rights, which ignores these abstract thoughts and provides for a common set of rights for everyone. These universal human rights could include a basic right to food, a basic right to shelter, a basic right to physical well-being, a right to education, work and movement, a right to choose our food and diet, a right to choose our sexual orientation, etc. Now let's take up the practice questions. Which state became the first to launch the Jan Suchna portal? The correct answer is option A, Rajasthan. Now let us take up the second question. Which of the following statements are correct? First, let us read out all the statements. The Jan Suchna portal of the Rajasthan government ensures compliance with the Lokpal Act. It is a single window portal hosting information and databases of different government departments in the interest of promoting suo moto sharing of information. Under this initiative, information kiosks in village panchayats and self-service e-mitra centers in the towns will be established to enable the people to access the information. Amongst the three given statements, the first statement is incorrect because the Jan Suchna portal establishes compliance with Section 4 of Clause 2 of the RTI Act. Under this provision of the RTI Act, the state governments and the centre have been mandated to promote voluntary sharing of government-related information through the establishment of such online portals. So Rajasthan has become the first government to establish this facility, and both the second and the third statements are correct because they explain the provisions and the features of the Jan Suchna portal. So option D is the correct answer. Now let us take up the next question. Which of the following statements are correct? The Human Genome Project was an international scientific research project with the goal of determining the base pairs that make up human DNA and of identifying and mapping all of the genes of the human genome from both a physical and a functional standpoint. It was initially funded by the US government and later by other groups around the world. The project was declared complete in 2003. All the three statements are correct. So option D is the right answer. Now let's take up the next question. Which of the following conventions have provisions related to human trafficking? Is it the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the United Nations Convention for the Suppression of Traffic in Persons and Exploitation of Prostitution, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women? The correct answer is option C. All the four conventions have provisions related to human trafficking. Now let us take up a map-based question. Tropical cyclones that develop in the Arabian Sea have caused the most damage to Yemen and Oman. The correct answer is option B. Now please take up an exercise. I want you to read about tropical cyclone formation in the Arabian Sea and why it causes the maximum damage to countries such as Yemen and Oman. There is a geographical reason behind it. I want you to figure this out and post it in the comment section below. Now let us take up a practice question from the 2015 prelims paper. With reference to dugong, a mammal found in India, which of the following statements are correct? It is a herbivorous marine animal. It is found along the entire coast of India. It is given legal protection under Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Statement 1 and 3 are correct, but the second statement is incorrect because dugong, which is also referred to as the sea cow, it is not found along the entire coast of India. It is found only in few pockets such as the Gulf of Kutch, the Gulf of Mannar, and it is also found around the Pak Bay and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And the IUCN status is listed as vulnerable. So option C is the correct answer. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question: human rights have been trampled by our subjective and abstract definitions. Do you agree? The second question: The recent amendments to the RTI Act weakens the institutional framework against corruption and lack of transparency in government functioning. Elaborate. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post them in the comment section below. This concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.